understand how Gibson-Graham's work is based on unlearning much that we think we know about economies, it is necessary to return to their early work, written mostly in a critical and analytical, if often also a playful register. In 1996, they published a book called The End of Capitalism as We Knew It. In this book, Gibson-Graham provokes some serious rethinking of the knowns that usually govern our economic thinking and politics. They're particularly after what they term capitalocentric discourses, meaning discourses that prioritize capitalist economies, practices, and sites while disparaging, omitting, and silencing others. Capitalocentrism thus denotes economic discourse in which, I quote, other forms of economy, not to mention non-economic aspects of social life, are understood primarily with reference to capitalism, as being fundamentally the same as or modeled upon capitalism, as being deficient or substandard imitations, as being opposite to capitalism, as being the complement of capitalism, as existing in capitalism's space or orbit. End of quote. Thus, on a macro level, capitalism becomes the prevailing and uniquely unified, expansive and resilient economic system of our times. It is against such a global capitalism that other economies are mirrored and valued. So capitalism in this way structures the general and hegemonic relations of economic life, and whatever differs from capitalism gets a complementary, peripheral, or otherwise marginal role. Non-capitalism, in this view, is found in the peripheries soon to be extractively colonized by the system, or non-capitalism is found in pre-capitalist times, or in the ephemeral promise of something beyond the present. The requirement for post-capitalism from such a perspective is that it be just as global and all-prevailing a system as we believe capitalism to be. Thus, capitalism becomes, as Gibson-Graham and others put it, I quote, the gravitational center of meaning-making, end of quote, that stakes off the parameters of economic interpretation and politics. Everything else is either absent from the picture or then it is present, but in a way that is rendered dependent of or a pale imitation of capitalism. This has performative effects for how we both understand reality and what can be done with or about it. In Gibson-Graham's account, this prioritization of capitalist practices and processes works in all kinds of economic discourse, from neoclassical economic theory to Marxist formulations of class struggle, and from everyday speech to media discourses, from policymaking to what happens in classrooms. And it works on all levels, from the micro to the macro and everything in between. So while global capitalism sets the parameters of macroeconomic thought and policy, as we've seen, capitalocentrism also concerns the most intimate makings of economic subjectivity. Thus, for instance, we come to associate ourselves or other people with economic worth, measured in money terms, and we become so attached to notions of wage labor or private property or capitalist corporations that life feels shadowed by the prospects of losing them or losing their prevalence in our lives. We start to feel as if there were no alternatives to the capitalist present, at least not alternatives that are desirable or doable, already existing alternatives. In some of their most provocative arguments, Gibson-Graham proposed that anti-capitalist thinkers are so attached to the idea of a heroic struggle against the essentially unwinnable enemy of global capitalism that they defend this enemy against efforts to delineate its discursive limits or to underline and explore its alternatives in their full richness. This, they argue, reproduces frameworks in which what we already know about capitalist structures of domination and about its global prevalence keep on making us blind to the alternatives that already exist. As Gibson-Graham put it in 1996, I quote, "It is the way capitalism has been thought that has made it so difficult for people to imagine its supersession." End of quote.